There are players who win games, and then there are players who win hearts. For anyone who lived through the 1970s, Sundays weren't complete without the Dallas Cowboys, America's team, and the man who led them with calm eyes and unshakable faith. Before the bright lights, before the fame, he was a soldier, a leader, a man who understood pressure long before he ever faced a third down. When Roger Staubach stepped onto the field, it wasn't swagger that defined him.
A kid asks him, "Are you going to be like Troy Aikman or Roger Staubach?"
Second leading rusher in NFL history, and Roger Staubach, Captain Comeback.
He made football look like a mission, not a performance. In an age filled with chaos and hard hits, he was the calm within the storm, the man who made the Cowboys feel invincible. When he dropped back to throw, you could sense it. Something great was about to happen. He wasn't just a quarterback, he was the heartbeat of a generation that believed in courage, loyalty, and doing things the right way. This is the story of Roger Staubach, the most respected leader of 1975. Long before the bright lights of Texas Stadium ever reflected off his helmet, Roger Staubach was already wearing a different kind of uniform, one stitched not with stars, but with purpose. Born in Cincinnati, raised on discipline and faith, he was the kind of young man who carried responsibility like it was part of his skin. While most quarterbacks learned pressure through playbooks, Staubach learned it through service. At the US Naval Academy, he didn't just lead a football team, he led men preparing for war. He won the Heisman Trophy in 1963, but when the world celebrated, he chose duty over fame. He traded stadium crowds for the silence of the South China Sea, serving as a naval officer during the Vietnam War. Those years shaped him. Out there, under the burning sun and restless nights, Staubach learned something few athletes ever do. Real leadership isn't about words, it's about presence. When he finally returned to America, football wasn't just a game waiting for him, it was a mission unfinished. The Dallas Cowboys drafted him in 1964, but he didn't join them until 1969, after his service. He arrived older than most rookies, but wiser than all of them. At first, nobody knew what to expect. The Cowboys already had stars, already had hope, but when Staubach stepped onto the practice field, something changed. The huddle grew quieter. The offense listened differently. His calm tone carried weight. His every instruction felt deliberate. Coaches noticed it instantly. This wasn't just another quarterback. This was a commander in cleats. His teammates called him Captain America, not out of mockery, but out of respect. And when he finally got his shot to start, he didn't waste a single moment. He led the Cowboys with the same calm fire he had carried across oceans. Every pass looked like it was guided by patience, every drive a reflection of military precision. Roger Staubach wasn't just playing to win, he was playing to honor something bigger: faith, discipline, and the belief that true leadership means standing tall, even when everything around you is falling apart. Before he ever wore a Cowboys jersey, Roger Staubach wore the uniform of the United States Navy. His story didn't begin in stadium lights, but in silence, aboard naval ships, thousands of miles away from home, where discipline wasn't a choice, it was survival. While most future NFL stars were running drills, Staubach was navigating oceans, leading men, and learning what pressure truly meant. It was there, among the salt air and steel decks, that he learned the calm that would later define him, the ability to breathe when everyone else panicked. At the Naval Academy, he had already shown flashes of greatness. In 1963, he won the Heisman Trophy, dazzling fans with his precision, decision-making, and poise under fire. But his success never changed him. When he was offered shortcuts, he refused them. When war called, he answered. For 4 long years, Staubach served his country before ever throwing a pass in the NFL. And by the time he returned, he wasn't just a quarterback, he was a man forged by purpose. When he finally joined the Dallas Cowboys in 1969, he wasn't the loudest man in the room. In fact, he barely spoke. But when he did, every teammate listened. He didn't demand respect, he earned it. He practiced harder than anyone, stayed later than anyone, and carried himself with the calm confidence of a man who'd already faced real fear and survived it. On the field, that military discipline turned chaos into order. He read defenses like radar, guided plays like missions, and when he spoke in the huddle, there was never doubt, only belief. By the mid-1970s, his leadership had transformed the Cowboys. He wasn't just calling plays, he was shaping men. He brought composure to a team known for flair and unity to a roster full of egos. They called him Captain America, not because he was perfect, but because he reminded everyone of what strength looked like: quiet, steady, and unbreakable. Roger Staubach didn't just rise to lead a team, he rose to embody an ideal. That leadership is not about shouting louder than others, it's about standing taller when it matters most. By the early 1970s, the Dallas Cowboys had become America's team, and at the center of that identity stood a man who never raised his voice, yet commanded absolute silence when he spoke. Roger Staubach wasn't the biggest or strongest quarterback in the league, but he had something no one could measure: unshakable belief. He believed in his team, in the system, and in the idea that no game was ever truly over. That belief turned ordinary Sundays into moments of legend. In 1971, after years of waiting behind veterans, Staubach finally became the starting quarterback, and instantly everything changed. The Cowboys, long criticised for falling short, began to look unstoppable. His poise under pressure became contagious. The team played with calm precision, like a well-trained unit following their captain into battle. That same year, he led the Cowboys to their first Super Bowl victory, earning the game's MVP and proving that leadership wasn't about noise, it was about presence. Fans across the nation saw something rare in him: humility in success. After touchdowns, he didn't celebrate with theatrics or taunts. He simply handed the ball to the referee and jogged back, eyes forward, already focused on the next drive. His opponents called him frustrating because you couldn't rattle him. You could blitz him, hit him, knock him down, but he'd get up, dust himself off, and throw a perfect strike on the next play. And then came the comebacks, the kind of moments that made grown men believe in miracles again. In 1975, down late against the Vikings in a playoff game, Staubach launched a desperate throw downfield, a prayer more than a pass. Drew Pearson caught it for a touchdown, and Roger later told reporters, "I closed my eyes and said a Hail Mary." That phrase would become part of football's language forever. It wasn't luck, it was faith. Faith in preparation, in teammates, and in something bigger than himself. Through the 1970s, he led the Cowboys to 5 NFC titles and 2 Super Bowl wins. But beyond trophies, it was his calm leadership that made him immortal. He showed America that courage doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it just whispers, "We're not done yet." Off the field, Roger Staubach was everything you hoped a hero would be: humble, family-driven, and grounded in faith. While others chased fame, he chased purpose. He didn't wear the mask of a celebrity, he wore the calm of a man who knew who he was. After the roar of the crowd faded and the cameras turned away, he'd go home to his wife, Marianne, and their growing family. A quiet house, a normal dinner, and laughter that mattered more than headlines. Teammates used to say that Staubach had 2 gears, focused and faithful. He prayed before every game, not for victory, but for strength to lead with integrity. That was his secret. In a sport built on ego, he was proof that you could lead without arrogance. He believed that the same discipline that kept soldiers alive in battle could keep players united on the field. And every Sunday, when he took the snap, you could sense that military calm in him, that balance between control and chaos, faith and fury. But what truly set him apart was the way he handled success. Super Bowl rings never changed his tone. Money never changed his values. After retiring from football, he didn't drift into the spotlight like most stars do. He built a new mission. Staubach started a real estate business that became one of the most respected in America, proving that leadership doesn't end when the uniform comes off. He mentored young athletes, spoke at schools, and often reminded them, excellence without character is just noise. He also became a voice for veterans, quietly helping military families long before it became fashionable to do so. For him, service wasn't a duty, it was who he was. He lived the same way he played: calm, disciplined, and committed to something bigger than himself. By the time the 1980s arrived, the league had changed. Flashier names took the stage, celebrations got louder, and football became more about entertainment than honour. But those who remembered the 1970s still carried his image in their minds. A quarterback who didn't need to scream to lead, who didn't need fame to inspire. Roger Staubach's mission wasn't just to win games, it was to remind people that true greatness is measured not in trophies, but in trust. When Roger Staubach finally walked away from the game in 1979, it felt like the end of an era, not just for the Cowboys, but for football itself. The league was changing. The noise was getting louder, the egos were getting bigger, and the calm sense of purpose that once defined Sundays was slowly fading away. But for those who had watched Staubach play, who had lived through those years when he led America's team with unshakable grace, his retirement wasn't a goodbye, it was a lesson carved into memory. He left the field the same way he entered it, humble, grateful, and focused on the people around him. There were no tears, no drama, just quiet applause and a soft nod to the crowd that had stood with him through every comeback. Fans didn't need grand speeches. They'd already heard everything he'd ever said, not through words, but through action. Every time he stood tall after a sack, every time he smiled in defeat, every time he carried himself with dignity, he was teaching them something. Leadership, they realised, wasn't about power. It was about patience. It was about how you handled the storm. Even after football, Staubach's influence never dimmed. In business, he built one of the most respected real estate empires in the country, leading with the same quiet strength that once guided the Cowboys. In the community, he became a mentor, a philanthropist, and a symbol of steady integrity in a world that often forgets what that looks like. Young athletes sought him out, not for techniques, but for truth, to understand how to lead without losing yourself. He'd tell them, don't chase success, build character, and success will follow. It wasn't a slogan, it was his life story. For Cowboys fans, his name still carries the weight of golden years. The clean white jersey, the calm voice in the huddle, and that unmistakable poise when the game was on the line. To this day, when fans re-watch those old clips, the perfect spiral cutting through Texas air, the sideline drives, the last-minute comebacks, they don't just see highlights. They see a man who represented an entire generation's values: faith, family, courage, and composure. Staubach's leadership stretched beyond the field. He embodied the balance between strength and humility, between competition and compassion. He showed that a true leader doesn't need to be the loudest, just the most consistent. And in a sport that has seen its share of stars come and go, very few ever left behind a legacy so deeply respected. Today, decades later, the Cowboys still stand as one of the most iconic franchises in sports. And though many great players have worn the star since, when you ask an old fan who defined the team's soul, the answer comes softly but surely. It's Roger Staubach, the captain who led not through fear, but through faith. He wasn't just the most respected leader of 1975, he was the standard every leader since has been measured against. And long after the cheers faded, his example remained. Steady, timeless, and quietly magnificent. If you still remember those Sundays, the crisp Texas afternoons, the Cowboys in blue and white, and Roger Staubach standing calm under pressure, then you've lived through football's golden age. Share this story with someone who still believes in true leadership. Hit like if these memories brought you back to the glory days, and subscribe to NFL Legends for more stories that keep the heart of football alive. Because real legends don't fade. They lead, even when the game is over.